While 14 million Americans are unemployed and 1 in 7 Americans are living in poverty, one group isn't doing that bad in the midst of this recession. We've told you about how the United States has the biggest gap between rich and poor than any other westernized country. And a new report found that the disparity was greater than in places in India. And now on top of all of that, a new Wall Street Journal report found that the top 35 financial institutions will get $144 billion in compensation and benefits in 2010. So what happened to all that talk about a crackdown on Wall Street, and why aren't more Americans outraged about all of this? Well, joining me to help discuss this is Gerald Celente, director of the Trends Research Institute. Gerald, what about all that talk about banks being held more accountable and scaling back after the big bailouts? Why isn't that happening?
Because what they did with the bailouts is they made the banks bigger. You have 10 banks controlling essentially 80% of all the action. So the bailouts worked precisely the way they were supposed to do. They made the rich richer and the bigger bigger. So it's a success when you look at it like that. And that's, as you pointed out, with the gap between the rich and the poor, the widest in the United States of any of the industrialized nations, the trend continues to go in that direction.
And so what should we make then when we hear President Obama saying all the time about how there's going to be more accountability on Wall Street and there's going to be a crackdown there? I mean, is it just empty words?
Well, of course it is. When you see that Obama, for example, was one of the biggest recipients from those people that got a lot of that money, and the Bush administration, of course, before them. We wrote a trend alert following the announcement of the TARP bailout in 2008. And we said that Washington was hijacked by Wall Street, and that's what happened. Look, Priya, you have a complete disconnect here going on between these white shoe boys with their $144 billion and the rest of the country. And that's why the people they're kind of numb about this. When you break this number down, we're talking about $144 billion. That would rank number 49 in the GDP of the world's countries, of 194 countries. So, and then you hear Lloyd Blankfein, the former CEO, the current CEO of Goldman Sachs, relate to what they're doing as, quote, God's work. Well, guess what? They got that heavenly payoff. Their spirituality is being shown in their bonuses. There's never been anything so atrocious happening in modern history, probably since the days of the robber barons over a century ago.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable when you put it in perspective like that. But it's interesting because we've been seeing so many mass protests across Europe because of governments over there cutting benefits. And most recently, we saw almost 300,000 people take to the streets of France after the government there voted to increase the retirement age by 2 years. Why aren't you seeing that kind of outrage and anger here in the United States? Have people kind of just given up on the government and are just simply trying to survive on their own?
Not really. It's beginning. You're seeing it with the Tea Parties. Of course, they've been co-opted by the Republican Party. But remember, no one would have ever thought that would have happened 3 years ago. So the movement is in place. This is our forecast. People are going to wait for the elections in November. They think they're going to have some other change that they could believe in. It won't happen. When the economic winter sets in, then you're going to start seeing people protesting more and more. No, this is just the beginning. The United States is slow on the draw when it comes to protesting, but get ready for it. We see it happening in 2011 and in 2012.
And you know, Gerald, I know I've asked you this before, but another interesting comparison that we've made in recent days between the United States and Europe is kind of pointing the finger at someone. I mean, we did a story the other day, and we looked into how the former Prime Minister of Iceland was actually being criminally prosecuted for his role in the financial crisis there. But you don't see anything like that happening here in the United States. I mean, who can we hold accountable for all of this? And why isn't that happening? Why isn't the finger being pointed at anyone?
It's very easy, Priya, why it's not happening. It's because of the media. Take, for instance, this guy, Steve Schwarzman, the CEO of Blackstone. Blackstone's profits just went up 12%. This guy's worth, I think he's like worth about $6 billion. He complained that because of changes in tax rules, he would have to pay more money. Quote, he said it was the equivalent of the Nazis invading Poland. The media let him get away with it. They should have been stringing him up. They should have been ripping him apart to the equivalent of a Holocaust denier. But because he's a senior member of the White Shoe Club boys, they make it really easy. So it's the mainstream media that keeps sucking up to these greedy pigs that tempers the people down from taking to the streets. Rather than chastising them, they just wink and smile and say, hey, next in the news, we're saving those people in Chile.
And you know, you talked about the White House Club of Boys, but I want to talk a little bit more about the Obama administration. I mean, how much of all of this is their fault? We've seen so many people from his staff retiring or leaving, I guess you could say, from Peter Orszag to Larry Summers. Are they realizing that these problems are unfixable, or that maybe the administration isn't handling them properly?
You mean the brilliant Larry Summers, the always brilliant Larry Summers, the chief economic advisor, another Obama rat that jumped ship? Is that the one you're talking about? They're losers. Everything they do is a loser. They're losing the wars. They're losing the war on drugs. And they're losing the fight against saving, you know, the economy. They're running out of stimulus money. Roma, she jumped ship too. No, this thing is going down, and you can't blame it all on Obama. It was Bush, it was Clinton. It's the whole system. It's the sellout of America. It's moving all the jobs offshore. This country's gone from the greatest entrepreneurial empire to one that Mussolini would have called fascism, the merger of state and corporate powers. And if you deny that, just look at the bailout numbers. The bonus numbers, excuse me, $144 billion going to the bigs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you and wondering if there possibly is something fundamentally wrong with this system. That's Gerald Celente, director of the Trends Research Institute.